Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. My name is Allison Kader. I'm a Senior Business Process Manager here at Carter's, focused on the digital product development implementation. I'm joined by Isaac Korn, the Director of Innovation at Perry Ellis. Hi, Isaac. David Grant from Fast Retailing. AJ, the Lead Solutions Architect from Under Armour. Vihey from Browseware, and Quach from PTC. So thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will answer them as they are WhatsApp to us. Just kick it off, diving right into it. Our first question, in what ways could and should seamless 3D PLM integration maximize and secure design efficiencies and collaboration? So I know this is really important to me as a brand that is using both 3D and PLM to really drive efficiencies throughout 3D. So I would like to ask Vihey that question first.
Sure. Well, that's definitely an interesting question. I think that coming from our perspective, when we look at designers coming into the system, I think that the combination between PLM and 3D system could actually, in a way, make this process much more fluent if the PLM itself would hold, or the PLM itself would be one source of truth. Okay, we're always looking into a one source of truth. And one source of truth in the case of 3D is the combination of information in PLM, which represents the manufacturing information, but also coming into the 3D world, preferably, it would also hold the information which is required in order to create the garment. So when a designer comes to its own work, he will find in the PLM system, which is, preferably connected directly, seamlessly into the 3D solution, he will find those assets that are both will be ready later on for manufacturing, but now he can use them for their best quality to present their design, to ideate their ideas, and to be able then to design both to cost, but both to, as well as into their best of creativity. So I would say combine those two sets of information, 3D digital product creation with real product creation all in one in the PLM, and something which is going to be very comfortable for search for designers. In fact, I would rather them not search, but instead getting what they need in order to complete their task. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. I agree. Isaac, what do you think as the lead of innovation? What efficiencies can we see through the integration?
Yeah, it's for us. It's becoming to be one of the most important things out there, because we see PLM as Abihai say, the source of truth. So if you combine PLM where all the information should be, and then you see your 3D asset and your 3D file where it gathers a lot of information, it needs to be a two-way street of connection. So you need to think about PLM. It's gonna hold all the libraries. It's gonna hold all the information. But then you're creating everything in 3D, which also has new information that still hasn't been fed into PLM. So you need to be able to generate that information in 3D and still connect it back to PLM. And then the other way around, if you're going to start designing a new garment in 3D, you need to be able to connect into PLM to gather all the information that you already have housed in PLM and be able to connect it into that new garment or 3D asset that you're designing. So it has to be a two-way street, that it's in constant communication, so you're able to seamlessly do the process. So it's not only from here to here, it needs to concentrate it both ways. So I think that it's very important, and it's one of the most important parts to be able to have like seamless integration and communication with the process.
Yeah, I agree. AJ and Quach, just from a technology point of view, what needs to happen to make these integrations more effective, to drive that one source of the truth and drive these efficiencies? Others can answer too, by the way. You know.
AJ, you want to go first?
That's fine. So I was actually gonna first of all, before you answer that, essentially kind of highlight some of the things you know, just been said. Essentially, in terms of the user experience, right? What we're trying to figure out is, yes, those things should be seamlessly connected. The idea is that we want to get to a place, if you want to really drive efficiencies, that you want to be in a place where your designer actually doesn't even understand, what doesn't even realize that they're in a PLM as they're working in a 3D garment, right? Essentially, that's what we really want to achieve, is that it should be like their UI, their experience should be just one thing. It doesn't matter if I'm in the PLM system or if I'm in the 3D system, my process of searching and finding stuff is the same, you know. And the other piece is that what we've always seen is in the process is that for the creatives, it's always the burden of data entry has always been great, right? So essentially, to achieve that efficiency, one of the things we really want to make sure is that we take away that task of that data entry away from the designer, allow them to be creative, and essentially use the information that's kind of collected as part of the design process to kind of you know, build out your bill of materials, you know, figure out your costing, essentially have that kind of tight end, right? And the last piece kind of we thought of is like, look, it's great, but I think one of the things that's kind of missing is at the end of the day, you want that designer, as they're designing, to have some sort of a feedback mechanism to understand that what are their decisions, what are the decisions impacting the enterprise in the long run, right? Is me adding this fabric gonna make this garment not adhere to margin? Am I in the right path for making sure that I'm on the right track in terms of design intent? Those are the things that we want to make sure that it's actually provided to the designer as the part of the design process. And I think that's where, if we can achieve those things, I think just aside from the bare bones connection of seamless data integration, that's where we see the process integration start to happen, and we get a lot of efficiencies.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate that, right? And maybe emphasize on some key points there that AJ as well as Isaac called out. So the integration needs to be obviously bidirectional, but I think in order to pull off that seamless experience that AJ was talking about, you really need openness, right? For example, the 3D tool really needs to be open so that when the designer is leveraging that 3D tool, he or she doesn't really need to know that they're, you know, accessing PLM, right? You know, that person should be able to pull up palettes, colors, prints, patterns, fabrics, all directly within the 3D tool. And I think, you know, 3D tools really need to do that. And, you know, credit to Abihai here for Browseware's approach. But I mean, that openness approach really allows customers and PLM providers like PTC to be able to go do that. One other point I'd like to mention here is that, you know, I think sometimes what often gets overlooked by, you know, pretty much everybody in this space here is the security that's going to be required to really pull off that seamless integration. You know, very often now brands are interacting with suppliers, factories that have 3D capabilities, and they need to be able to securely collaborate with those factories. So if I'm a factory and I need to be able to bring in a 3D file to go satisfy some design brief from a brand that I'm working with, right? They need to be able to do that with confidence. And then on top of that, a brand might say, well, you know, hey, factory, if you're going to come in and create this 3D garment or virtual sample for me, I need to be able to give you access to my color and print direction, for example, or maybe some artwork that I'm giving you access to. And, you know, that integration needs to be secure enough so that suppliers aren't seeing each other's information, or suppliers are only seeing information that the brand can give them access to or want to give them access to inside the 3D tool.
So have any of you attempted to seamlessly integrate the information from a 3D native file into PLM, and what worked and what didn't work?
I can speak to that a little bit. I think one of the things that we've realized is that it's not necessarily the tools themselves. Sometimes the stumbling block is the process, right? I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say that I want to take my 3D file and auto create a bill of material out of it, right? Now, our current process is that somebody at the brand side does a minimum amount of work, whether it be main materials or maybe a fully spec'd out material, hands it over to the vendor, and they give you, it's either produced internally or the vendor creates that 3D file for you, right? But what's the point of integrating that back into the system to kind of grab that BOM? Because the 3D file was created as a consequence of the BOM being in the system. So why do we want to integrate it back, right? So until that process change starts to happen and we start actually designing in 3D, some of the things that we can do, what are you going to do with it? right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks I've found, is that yes, we can connect these technology from a technology perspective, but until the process starts to change and people actually start designing in 3D from the get-go, you start losing some of this value.
Um,
And I think that's a good point. So, when I think of integration with PLM and 3D, I think there's like 2 points. So one is the process of creating a 3D garment. So, I believe we should, traditionally, what do? We create a tech pack and we submit that tech pack to a factory, they create a garment. There's really no reason to reinvent the wheel here initially. The tech pack that you're creating in your PLM solution should have access to a digital fabric library, should have access to any trims that have been created in 3D. So that's part of the integration from like a material standpoint. Create that tech pack, and it's a sample request to, instead of a factory, could be a 3D designer, could still be a factory that's creating a 3D, doing 3D work with you. And then once you have that, the integration back is always in sync, as has been mentioned, because when there's updates, it needs to be reflected in both places. But 3D, one of the big selling points has always been you do fittings, right? Do fittings with 3D. Well, why would I be doing fittings in the 3D software if I can do it in my PLM software, where I have all of my sample history, I have all of my fit history, comments and changes to grading, and have that integrated with the 3D. So I can make the changes in 3D. I can do the actual virtual fitting, if you will, and within the PLM system, versus doing it outside of that. So I think I don't know if we're quite there yet. I know a lot of companies are working toward that. We've got there's a few key players in the PLM world, a few key players in the 3D world. Some are more open than others, and the others, I think they're starting to develop APIs. So at a certain point, we'll get to a point where look at SAP. You get SAP ERP. There's a plugin or a connector for JDA planning. There's connectors for centric software, for PTC, for PLM. What we need to get is these PLM companies to have those connectors for a browser, a flow, or whatever the key players are, and vice versa, so that everyone is more connected. Because I'm not saying I give up hope, but there's not going to be one solution. There's not going to be an agnostic, everything. We work well with every system. That's just not going to exist because it's different technologies and that. So
that's a really good segue to a question we got from the audience. They said, we're at the start of our 3D journey. More often than not, a brand will have licenses with multiple 3D platforms, and we all know these platforms have their differences. Are these differences significant enough to warrant tailor-made integrations with PLM? So as you're saying, people are making things for all different situations, but are these differences enough that we have to tailor make every single integration?
I want to get that one. The main thing with 3D right now is that you have big players and they don't communicate with each other. So if you start with one platform, you most of the time have to finish with that same platform. So it all depends of what 3D system you're doing or you're using, and then what you're gonna get out of it, or how do you want it to communicate. That in most of the cases right now, how we see it, it has to be some sort custom depending on what information you're getting from the 3D software and how open your PLM system is. So, for example, we have Quach Hai here, browser. Browser provides you with a lot of information that then you can use and you can bring into your PLM system as it fits your workflow. And you need to be able to understand that, and you need to be able to see how you can set up everything in order to be able to fit it into PLM correctly. But if you have multiple systems, then I feel that it becomes an issue with things like libraries and things like that, because each system has a different source file that you're not able to open in different systems. So then there's no communication with the other systems. So even if you're able to manage everything in PLM and have all the information in PLM, it doesn't mean that you're able to open a CLO file in browser, because even though you have connection, it's not going to open. So that's the main thing about 3D right now, is that all of the softwares, they don't communicate with each other, and it can become a real issue when you do these types of integrations. And I know that a lot of companies work with multiple software, so I do see that issue as a main pain point.
Maybe I want to talk a few words into what I'm hearing, because I think that the panel itself is under the title of interoperability, and the idea was a lot about connecting 3D and PLM. But it seems to me that we are at a stage in so many places in the industry where the entire 3D flow or workflow is still a bit new for the players in the industry, especially the traditional brands and retailers. And therefore, let me offer a direction. It's not necessarily the direction, but the direction that we think about what is 3D and what is the process, and therefore what would be the interoperability requirements with PLM and any other platform. So, it's very simple. Think about 3D and the way that we are enabling it in browser as an alternative, or a replacement to the physical sample. As long as that replacement is a true to life, or if you want, a digital twin to the physical sample, then you can think from that point on whatever you need to think about that workflow. Once you have that replacement to a physical sample, and you have a trust that this is that really gives you the look and feel and behavior of that 3D, that means that you can do most of everything, maybe except touching it, most of everything that you would do in a physical process. Once you can do that, you can do probably much more within the digital process, much faster, much more iterations, and so on and so forth. Now, when you think about having a process that can virtually be from end to end in digital, then you can start thinking about how do you utilize different components in the system. So you can think about it's not exclusively, but I'll just throw here an idea that you can start a 3D design using assets that are stored within the one source of truth that could be the PLM. Starting meaning being able to get your brief through the PLM system, and it already, for the designers, it already shows them or points out to what are the reasonable materials for them to use for that, colors, color libraries, trims, buttons, zippers, and so on, and materials, of course, and all of that. And then they would go into the design process, and the design process will continue into the fitting process. And once this is all done digitally and approved digitally, and I'm not going into where PLM comes in and out from that digital process, but let's say that most of it is done in 3D, we're coming back to the end of the process with that digital, that 3D digital prototype. And let's say that at the end of the day, the brand says, yes, this is what we want. Now, with a click of a button, all the information goes back into the PLM, but it already came from the PLM. So essentially, it already connected to exactly what needs to be done on the factory floor in order to create that physical sample that will be the physical twin to the digital one. So there you go, one offer of a workflow that begins from PLM, goes to 3D, ends up in PLM, and everything in between, which is a non-linear process going back and forth between brands and their factories in order to make that style best possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, do you think that true 3D at scale is achievable without a PLM integration? One of the questions we received from the audience. So you're talking about a workflow that has underpinnings of PLM, but can we truly get to scale without integration? AJ, I see you shaking your head.
No, you can't, right? And some of the reasons you can't is because That 3D at the end, yes, it's a manufacturing blueprint. That's what we want it to be, right? You want that asset to carry through from design all the way through to e-com, various iterations of that thing, right? But at the end of the day, there's still supporting information that is needed at the manufacturing level that can't and shouldn't be contained in that 3D file. For example, if I use a certain fabric and a certain color, I don't want the dip information to be part of the 3D asset. I want that to be go to a lab dip software that does color analysis and can give me spectral color analysis and give me that information. I don't want that to be part of the 3D asset tool. So therefore, the supplemental information that you kind of use to manufacture and essentially make sure that your garment can actually be bought, it can't and shouldn't be part of that 3D. That at the end of the day, that 3D is a manufacturing specification for the finished garment, right? But there's essentially, so no, you need PLM to be in the picture.
Yeah. Just to add to what AJ said there too, when you think about what PLM does, right, it doesn't just manage the product development for a single product, but for an entire product line, right? And I think sometimes when people think about 3D, they think about it in terms of just, a design or development for a single product. But when you have data and integration between 3D and PLM, then you can start to do some really interesting things like aggregate materials across multiple 3D designs, and then really understand with the 3D information and the pattern information what your material consumption is going to be, right? That gets you better accuracy, not just to better accuracy in understanding what your costs are, not just at a single product level, but at a product line level, right? And there's more benefits there. And of course, many brands today will multi-source, right, to either reduce risk or add additional capacity. And obviously, when a garment is multi-sourced, certain things like trim components could be sourced from different suppliers. Even fabrics and linings can be sourced from different mills, right? And so that information might not be in the 3D file, but certainly should belong in PLM as well.
What are the opportunities and challenges of using PLM as a 3D library for trim, fabric, et cetera, as that repository?
Yeah, I think, the basic one is, get your materials library in order, right? I think a lot of brands here, even in the absence of 3D, if you kind of just take 3D off the table, a lot of brands still need to create the right materials classification scheme that they should be able to use. They should have a materials development process that incorporates lab dips as well as pricing and variations of those fabrics or trim components. So you really need to get your materials library in order, and then incorporate in the digital information that would support a 3D tool, or that a 3D tool requires, right? So get your materials in order first, and then get them digitized, and then you can start to leverage them in 3D.
So how can the 3D tools take advantage of all of that data and provide near real-time feedback to the designer during their creative process?
I think that goes back to the to, at least for me and the people that we work with, it goes back to the one source of truth. Okay, one source of truth and consistency. If we are building a whole workflow and we have a PLM system that holds all the information, then it's far better than information being scattered all over the place. I've seen situations where information is being stored for manufacturing inside the PLM, and then assets for the 3D garment creation is stored in a separate DEM. And it sounds like possible in the digital world, but number one, it's a hassle to achieve that. Just thinking about synchronizing this data, and if a PLM system can do a good job in storing all of this material, so why? But then of course, then the question goes to the PLM system itself. It needs to be in order to be able to give the designers their access. I mean, that designer shouldn't even know, as I heard earlier on where the material is being stored. For them, it should be one access, easy search, find everything you want, click a button, and you start working with that on your 3D. For that, it has to be, in my perspective, for speed and accuracy, it has to be stored in the same place, and that will immediately maintain or it will take away the need to synchronize different systems. But also, once PLM takes the commitment to store the data, which is sometimes a big data that needs to be used for creativity and design, then it also needs to be handed to the 3D systems or within the organization in a speedy way. And there are a couple of PLM systems out there that knows how to do that, but that's a key element. I mean, next to the pros of having this information put in one place, there's also the cons, or at least some things that people need to be conscious about, and that would be the speed once PLM starts to handle information which is relevant for the design. Another point would be that once the information is stored in the PLM matter, then as a designer, I should be able to expect the material to be completely updated. So whether it's same material being updated from the mill, with physical information and visual information, all of that, I think PLM is a good place to be always the one source of truth, which is updated constantly. And then if that's the correct way that we are looking at it, so as a designer, there are multiple benefits of working with a system that is a trustworthy like that. So just to throw you an example, I started my design, and if I am now designing to a cost and I finished my design and I like it, but then the PLM system, which holds all the information, knows how to offer me, a very similar material that has better pricing, better costing for my purposes. That should be something that connects seamlessly into my 3D. I should be able to see it right there and then. And if I can then select it and put it into the system, that will be awesome. Next to it, if there is a material that looks pretty much the same, but then again, if we are conscious about sustainability and that one has a higher ranking of sustainability and the PLM system can offer that to me, that would be awesome from a different direction. And I believe that in order to create this workflow, PLM is a good, valid system to keep the information updated and to offer it through the 3D in a completely seamless way directly to the designer's workflow.
Um, we have talked a lot about PLM being the source of truth and all that stuff, and we have talked about PLM being a source to be able to find the libraries and things like that. Also, a very good opportunity, and as we see it, is that not only fabric library but also your block library. That's very important to be able to find. And again, we have talked about that. It's very important for the designer to not think about it. So if you have a correct block library that the designer can start on, that's a great benefit and a great concept. And then if they can review the fabrics and they can choose the fabrics that are available, because one of the things is that they can start designing and not knowing what fabrics are available, what fabrics are not current right now. So that's a good feedback that they can have right now. And also something like for us that could be very beneficial, we have over 20 brands that we design in different locations. And something right now that it's very important is like how we can unify the way that we source around those brands, how we can leverage different fabrics in different places. And sometimes some of the people that design for one brand have no idea what other brands are designing. So if all the information is inside of PLM and all information is there, there's very much easy to share that information between the teams, so the teams can understand where is an opportunity to use some fabrics or to use some different things, so that when they start the design process, they already know these different opportunities and understand these different things from the get-go. So of course that needs to happen. It's a process to be able to generate that library, to be able to standardize all things, because first you have to be able to standardize inside your PLM system and standardize your workflow and standardize your PLM in order to be able to start doing these connections. If you don't have those processes standardized, then it's just garbage in, garbage out, because the connection is not making any sense. So first you need to be able to standardize your process, standardize your blocks, standardize your fabrics, and then to be able to understand what information you're going to get from PLM to 3D and from 3D to PLM. And once you understand those connections and those standardizations, then the feedback can become very important and very dynamic as we move forward.
Just to add, I think Isaac makes a really good point about being able to, if you have a PLM integrated with your 3D, being able to leverage across brands. And it's been kind of mentioned, but that also applies very much to leveraging third-party vendors and factories. So one of the things that we've been working to do is very much we like to have our factories create our 3D, at least our initial prototypes in 3D. And having them on our PLM system, again, just to reiterate, having a global solution, central repository, all that information allows you to leverage, whether it's a brand level, third parties, factories. So it can be very powerful. But the other point I think that was just made, and I agree wholeheartedly, is the process has to be there. So there has to be a very clearly defined process, because otherwise, again, garbage in, garbage out, as was just mentioned. But if you can define that process and keep everything very well organized, the potential with leveraging a global solution that's integrated with 3D is very powerful.
So we have a question from the audience that you touched on, so I'm going to ask it so we can expand on that. We hear brands trying to bring their external partners into their PLM platform and into their 3D processes. How is external partner integration into these systems impacted when the two softwares are already connected? Is it easier? Is it more complicated? So I think the question there relates to both software and process, as you've been saying, that they both need to shift. But is it easier for those that are working with brand partners, or is it more complicated?
Partners from like a vendor standpoint, like a software
Sorry, yeah,
vendor?
I said brand. I meant I meant
Yeah,
factories.
I think, again, some PLM solutions, they have very specific integrations they support today. Some 3D companies have, very specific integrations that they're supporting. We're moving toward, where the key players will, I think, be able to support the key players from the other side. And, it'll be in a couple different ways. One will be, like API/plugins that'll be able to utilize, or in some cases, if it is truly an open source system, there'll be like reusable modules that can be applied, or if you have luxury of having internal engineers, if it's open source, you can also take control and do it yourself. So yeah, it's a lot easier if it's integrated. I just don't. We're not quite there. Again, I think there's very specific integrations that exist today, but you have to then purchase those solutions.
Sometimes I feel for the vendors because they have to deal with multiple partners, with multiple brands that use totally different systems, each one, and the vendor has to figure out how to connect to each one of the systems, or we have to provide them with all the tools. So sometimes I feel for the vendor because each company works a little bit different, and even though the process can be as simple as possible, and it's funny because we're all making garments, but our internal processes vary from company to company without a doubt, and each one needs different things. And then at the end of the day, the more technology you provide to the vendor, it's the more workload you're putting into them. So sometimes we also have to be mindful of the vendor to understand that what we're trying to ask for them and how to be able to connect that in a better way. But again, it's mindful of them, and sometimes I feel for them because they have to deal with all of us, and all of us have different requirements.
Maybe I want to say again, I'm going back to the primitives here. Okay, I'm so old, so I know this business in and out for so many years. And I feel that PLM system, as I know it from earlier days when I met it in the mechanical world, this is where I learned that PLM is very, very powerful. But it all came after the 3D CAD system were there in the mechanical world. So you would design your knot or airplane, for that matter, and you would finish your work creatively and, of course, technically on the 3D CAD. And then I want to make it as simple as it sounds. You would click a button, and the rest of the work, the rest of everything that needs to happen in order to create that airplane physically should and is handled by the PLM system. Any other way is just a big mess. Now, what happened in the apparel is that it was a bit reversed. PLM came first, and 3D came only later. So the integration between those two, I think, brings back the powerful and what we see in the mechanical world. Now you can have designers and pattern makers work on the 3D, finish their work, get it approved by the stakeholders in the company, and with a click of a button, let the PLM do the rest. And then everyone wins, including the factories which you asked about. For them, it's going to be again and again getting the same information in the same format. They will expect the file coming from PLM to be the same, except coming with different patterns, different materials, and different design. But the rest of it, the template of what comes out of the brand, should be the same. The data should be the same. It should not be an effort for the factory to handle multiple sources, emails, and PLM and ERP. None of this. It's not required anymore. And that is coming out of what everybody here said, an organized process, starting with a 3D, maybe starting with a PLM because it holds the information, going through a 3D, ending up with a PLM that in an organized and I want to say standardized manner, keep pushing the information to the factories in the way they expect it.
Thank you for that. So we've been getting a bunch of questions, so I'm going to go through some of them. First, this question says, for those like us at the start of our 3D journey, how important do you believe it is to plan for PLM integration from the get-go? Or can this be an afterthought once we've ran the proof of concept? So, AJ?
I don't think you need to integrate right off the bat. I mean, we're pretty much at, for last year, because of COVID restrictions, we essentially did 100% SMS digitally. We're not integrated. We're scaled to that matter. We use all three tools out there for 3D creation, but we're not integrated to the point of we've created efficiencies, used our PLM system to hold the 3D information when necessary, used a homegrown DAM when necessary, but we're not fully integrated. We're on that path to be integrated, but we're not. I don't think as long as I think what you need to understand is that the process needs to come first. As once you understand what your process flow is going to be, then you start thinking about integrating your systems. Because if you start integrating your systems without knowing what your process is, essentially you're going to end up redoing everything anyway. So figure out your process, start small, and start small means start with a small set of things, right? When you say start small, doesn't mean only look at one problem. Yes, try to solve one problem, but understand how that fits into the larger scheme so that you don't design yourself into a box and say, look, I'm going to solve for just the render. And now because I designed just for render, now I can't do design. Or vice versa. Essentially understand how that value chain is going to look like. Start small, start in one category, scale up, whatever you need to do to do that. But it's understand what your long-term implications are of your decisions you're making. But I mean, yeah, you don't need to integrate right off the bat.
I would say I would agree with AJ there, but I would also say that if you want to scale your process, you then do need to actually consider, the PLM integration. And
yep,
just by example here, right? Once you have that 3D asset, you want to be able to democratize access to that asset, right? You want to be able to support things not like just costing and sample reviews, but line reviews, right? Whether it be initial line reviews or line reviews later on. And of course, you want to be able to, I can imagine category managers, the brand managers, the merchandisers that are in those line reviews, they want access to those 3D assets, and they want access to those 3D assets along with the tech pack and along with the cost information and the margin information, right? And so, PLM helps with all of that, obviously, and it can be the aggregator of all of that information. So if you don't integrate them right off the bat, I would say very shortly after you've been able to prove that you can actually execute a 3D process, then you should step back and say, okay, now big picture, how do we really amplify the benefits, right?
I'm gonna piggyback on that what you just said, right? One of the things that we're seeing right now is there was a statement made earlier about the major players on each side are starting to talk to each other now. So from a brand perspective, it actually maybe makes sense to say, look, we're gonna wait for you guys to figure it out, right? Because that way we don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? You figure out what that integration is going to look like, whether it be, browseware being integrated to PTC and Centric because they decided to build a plugin, or whether it's close and, hey, PLM solutions, give me your API, I'm going to build a plugin, whatever it is, right? For us, as long as that connection works, we don't care, just build it and we'll use it.
Absolutely. Just build
I
it.
want to go ahead.
It's easy, right?
No,
Easy
I
enough,
actually,
for sure.
go ahead, Isaac.
No. Go ahead. No, I totally agree. That's what we love seeing right now is that finally you guys are talking to each other. So it's pretty cool because at the beginning it was sort of like a fight of getting everybody together on the same table and everybody being able to be open to be able to understand like, hey, these needs to be able to talk to each other. So we're pretty glad of what we have seen during the past few years because it became like 3D. At the beginning, 3D was like some sort of like something totally new. Nobody was sure about it and something like that. And now it became a need. It became something that it's happening, and it's pretty nice that both sides of the solutions are talking to each other and be able to make this process seamless because that's the way to do it. So I just wanted to point that out.
No, that's a good point. And also I want to go back what was saying. Yeah, you're right. We can figure it out, but as I think as a concept for browser, you know that we've been open since day one, but I think that and we are very much open today, and I'm happy that many players, traditional players in this industry and new players are all coming and utilizing the platform in order to bring in more value to our clients. But at the end of the day, once we are building and we are thinking totally about how to create this workflow that will fit everyone, then I want to say that we can figure it out by ourselves, but I wouldn't bet on that. I mean, we can come with innovative ideas, and that's what we do. That's our part in it. But what we are doing, and what I am consisting on, and I'm part of the, my baby is the product. What I'm insisting on is that we don't do that alone in our own sellers, not us with the partners. It has to be with the clients, because the clients themselves, we can bring awesome, multiple features, and none of them will be used. And you said yourself, start small, but I'm adding, start with something that brings you value. The moment it brings you value, and if it can bring value to other categories of garment, other people in the organization, then it's time to scale it. And then that goes to everything, including integration with a PLM system and everything else. Even the integration with PLM system, we can work now on trying to integrate just about everything. But at the end of the day, will you use it? Who knows? So let's go for the things that you really need today that will really make your designers want to come into the system and use it. And then when they're done, they will make the life of everyone so easy because they will click a button and it will just deploy to everyone that needs to see the outcome. Or from a different perspective, you want to bring your designers in, you want to make them feel that they're in compelling environment. You don't want them to say, again, PLM system. You don't want that. You want them to feel that, they go to the PLM system to select the material, or they go into the 3D and through it, they see the PLM, as you said, that it should be completely seamless for them. But the feeling, the experience for them should not be different or maybe even better than the alternative of going to the drawer and seeing the physical and touching and feeling the physical fabric. It shouldn't be like that because we want to go into the digital. But in digital, it shouldn't be like a small swatch. It should be an image of a material that was draped, and it gives you all the, the visuals and the lightings and everything. And that's something that could be achieved by PLM. It's we're not talking here rocket science. And again, I know PLM system guys that are thinking and doing that. And for us, integrating with that is just about better experience for the users. So you need to work with us on making it the best way for how you think it should be.
Yep. So, Avi, I just a quick note, right? I think you guys have done fantastically in making your platform open, completely open, and the open APIs. The one thing I've kind of like always struck is there an opportunity for some players like you essentially to create essentially a marketplace for third-party folks to kind of create small snippets of its functionality that brands can essentially buy and plug. What I see when I go to GitLab Hub is there's tons of stuff, but it's not organized. It's for a non-technical person, for a business person to go in and say, hey, maybe I want to buy X piece of functionality. How can I contract with somebody else to develop this for me? It's not quite there. So I think it might be an advantage to create a marketplace of some sort of in there.
I take it. Actually, you're preaching to the choir, but I take it. Now that I'm hearing it from you and it's going to be recorded, you just made my day.
So another question from the audience. The pandemic has boosted interest in digital product creation, and we are seeing way more companies wanting to utilize it and scale at much greater speeds. How important is PLM in underpinning this? I think, AJ, you kind of answered that already with saying you've been operating without an integration. But does anyone have a differing or supporting point of view?
I mean, I support that. You don't have to have a PLM system to utilize 3D and get benefits. It's actually, I was just thinking, a couple of years ago, we were having these types of panel discussions about, is 3D right for retail? Now we're talking about, we're way beyond that. We've progressed, and now we're talking about the integration to PLM and other systems because we want to see what's the next step of it. But no, absolutely, I support with what AJ said before that, you could definitely start with 3D and then figure out, where those integration points are after.
So,
Yeah.
Sorry, Isaac.
No, what I do feel is that it all depends on how they foresee their digital transformation. Like I would imagine that most of the companies right now are doing some sort of PLM, and so they need to understand how that digital transformation works for them. Does it include 3D, or they want to start with creating digital boards and then moving from there, or they need to be able to understand how that digital transformation transforms. But PLM, it's a main part of that digital transformation because it's the hub for all the information. So I would say that not because of COVID we need to think about it. It's that since the beginning you need to be able to think about it, PLM as that hub, and then that will take you to the next level and the next level and the next level that you want to achieve as a company.
So we as a panel have said don't need integration to start using 3D, but to get to scale, integration becomes very important. So this next question might be kind of I'll just read it. Whilst PLM promised to be a big game changer for the industry when rolled out, enough wasn't done to ensure it reached its true potential. Does the panel think the rise in the adoption of 3D will reinvigorate the need for and interest in PLM?
I honestly don't understand the question in terms of PLM hasn't reached its potential, because I think PLM's potential is how much you use it. If you use PLM as a holding place for three different things and it's unstructured data and you really don't do anything with it, then PLM hasn't reached its potential. If you use PLM to its fullest potential and use it to track your quality, use it to track your manufacturing, then it has reached its full potential. So I don't quite understand what that question is asking in terms of PLM hasn't given its potential. What does it mean?
To me, it goes back to process as well, right? So if you don't change your process to utilize the PLM, you're not going to reach potential. In the same way, if you don't change your process to fully utilize 3D, you're not going to reach the potential. So I think it does, for me, go back to a process question of how you change how you work and how you become more efficient using the technology and the tools that you have at hand. But Avihai, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think what I said earlier on of introducing now 3D as the twin, the twin brother of the what happened in the in the rigid world where PLM started after the CAD systems over there. Then in the apparel world, we are looking at the same thing now that we have 3D, and designers and pattern makers can concentrate on creating the garments. Then I am I think that this is the time for PLM to rise and shine, and being able to hold the information and then distribute it to the manufacturing, that thing that they do great, and and so many other things that PLM does well. And by that, and for the fact that designers, in the past, for them to do the work mostly in PLM was something that many of them pushed back. So now, since many of them are coming to the 3D, then I'm sure that PLM is poised to service many more users and much more content in the coming years, like it was in the other industries that it was serving for many years before. Now, that would be one aspect of getting PLM to become more needed in the near future when it's integrated into 3D. But I think that the next step for PLM is where it have a potential to connect those 3D designs and garments which are finished completely in the digital 3D manner and approved and everything, and being able to take those into the supply chain of the future, which includes smart factories and automated factories. And by giving the bridge in between 3D and those automated creation floors, if you want, I think PLM has a lot to say there. And the more or the smaller the orders become, and the more orders that are there, I think that more information will need to be communicated in the best way possible from the designer's desk directly to manufacturing. And there, I think PLM can do a very good job in being that guy in the middle.
I believe that PLM will never reach its potential because it's always going to be an evolving tool. There's always going to be a need for more. So at some point, can PLM detect the garment that you created in 3D and analyze it and understand that this garment goes to this factory or something like that, and automatically create that sort of communication? Can PLM at some point generate multiple versions in multiple things? So there's like, I think that PLM, it's always going to be an evolving tool as all the systems evolve. So don't think about it like, oh, I already reached the maximum plateau of PLM. I think that it's an evolving tool, that it's always gonna have something more to say and something more to be able to automate, because that's what we're trying to use PLM for, and that's what we're trying to use this communication for, to try to automate the process more and more every single day.
Yeah. So if I may, I'm being the only PLM person on the panel, I'd like to respond to that a little bit, or maybe just all of the comments. First and foremost, it is a little bit of a shame if there are impressions or perceptions out there saying that, hey, PLM really hasn't met its full potential already. I think I agree with you there, Allison. A lot of it has to do with process, right? You have to ensure that your designers, your tech designers, your product developers, and your merchandisers are all in lockstep and bought in on the PLM vision, right? Oftentimes, again, outside the context of 3D, when we talk to brands, you might hear one group of users say, well, why do I have to put this data into the system, right? And yes, it might be considered quote unquote work for one group of users to put data in the system, but it benefits everybody, right? It benefits, for example, putting in a bill of material into PLM benefits the downstream sourcing folks, benefits the materials development team, right? Because they know then what to go develop and what they need to confirm, et cetera. So it very much is a process, I think, challenge. And if you don't nail that, then you're not going to get the benefits out of PLM. But I really like Isaac's point too, that PLM is evolving, right? And I think that, again, being the only PLM person on the panel, it's incumbent upon us PLM providers to take a step back now and say, look, we've provided a PLM system for apparel, footwear, accessories, retail, et cetera, for the past, 15, 20 years. We're at a point now where we need to completely change the way we think about product development because of 3D, right? I mean, there's a, there's a cliche that everyone says, hey, it used to be that you can, design products and then you got to make them and then you sell them. But with 3D, you can design and then sell and then make, right? I mean, it's a cliche, but it also rings true. But to achieve that vision of that process change, right, PLM vendors really do need to rethink how product development actually happens. Like, do you actually need to start with a tech pack anymore? I forget, I think maybe David, it was you that said, today you create a tech pack, you send that to a supplier, and they could actually go create a 3D garment or a virtual garment for you. Well, the question is, why not just design natively and first and foremost initially in 3D, right? The tech pack then follows the 3D garment, right? And then the sourcing and the costing. So it's incumbent upon us PLM vendors to realize that there's a shift in the way that you work and adapt the capabilities accordingly, right? So maybe, and I won't say that this is definitely our strategy, but maybe the emphasis on creating a product spec or a tech pack initially isn't there anymore, and it's about interpreting or parsing the 3D garment and or the 3D model and saying what can we derive from that to go create the tech pack, right? And then also, how do we change our capabilities so that those other types of collaboration I was mentioning earlier, like the line reviews, how do we enable virtual line reviews, right? And so, again, not to belabor the point here, but Isaac's absolutely right. PLM needs to evolve, right? And those that don't evolve and shift to adapting a more digital process really are failing their customers then.
So we did have a question specifically for you, Quach and Hai. Is 3D and PLM integration a top priority for your business? And I want to build on that with what we're just talking about to say, is future innovation and automation driven by your retail partners part of that prioritization?
Javier, you want to go first?
Yeah, look, for us, I want to be a bit more politically correct here, and I'm going to say that for us, openness, which means integration and automation, is number one priority for Browser. We've invested since many, many years in our open platform and APIs and what have you, and human readable formats of different primitives that we're using. So it's going to be easy for our clients, but also for our partners to utilize the data and bring back value to our clients. In other words, we assumed at the very beginning of Browser 2 that getting our clients to build a 3D is not an easy task. Definitely not in 2012 and these days when it was all about early adopters. So getting them to do the 3D was already an effort. But then the more we could have provide value back to our clients, that's what led us. And in order to do that, we've opened our system because we knew that there are many other talented developers out there that would come with things that we didn't even think about, or we just could not do them because it just requires more capacity that we have. One of which, and then we've made a platform that enables to do the two-way connection, bring in materials and assets from any type of any sort, and also put out information that others can do a lot of things with it. Now, we didn't know at the time that PLM would be one of the major partners out there that connects with us. But now we know, after so many years, we have many players from the PLM space building their own connections into our system, being able to do so through the APIs, and that's the meaning of interoperable. It's not about moving files from one side to the other or exchanging or translating. It's about going directly to our system using the API, either putting information in or taking information out for the sake of making the life better for the users and making it fluent from the brands to the vendors and back. So I think it's number one important, and I see a lot of PLM systems that are understanding that this is the situation. Everybody has their own interpretation of how to connect to our system, but I think all of them understands that this is important, and we are, we welcome that.
Yeah, and to answer from a PTC point of view, Allison, absolutely, right. The interoperability between PLM and 3D is very much a top priority for us. That's witnessed by the fact that we were the first PLM provider to provide a native and embedded integration with Browseware, per the user experience that Avihai was describing earlier. But I would say we're not stopping there. It's not to us just about interoperability. it's about a bigger vision of digital product creation, right? And incorporates things that I was talking about earlier, like the ability to leverage those assets for line reviews and sample reviews, and the ability to serve out to the to the 3D system cost information, so the designer can actually see that in line while he or she is developing in that tool. So it's absolutely a critical priority for us.
Okay, so just got the 1 minute flag. Do you guys have any final thoughts they'd like to leave us with? All right. Well, I do. So I think that the interoperability of 3D and PLM is becoming much, much more important as we develop these new processes to serve a digital product creation workflow. So it's nice to hear that you guys are talking to each other and really working together. I think Isaac's points about future automation and innovation are incredibly important. To David's point, we were here 3 years ago talking about, is 3D right? I think we're going to be here in a year or so talking about what automation innovation steps we've taken in the past year and what we're looking at next. So looking forward to those discussions. Does anyone, AJ, Isaac, I see you're both off mute, if you'd like to add anything?
No, exciting times are gonna come. I'm pretty much excited about what's coming. We started this journey 2.5, 3 years ago, and everything that we have seen has evolved so fast that we haven't, like, sometimes it's hard to keep up. So it's very exciting to be in this world. It's very exciting to see what's to come, and we're very excited that the partners are also seeing that importance. So it's pretty exciting to be here right now.
Yeah, and one thing I want to share is that there's a couple of motifs that's run through different talks throughout today, right? And one of the things I've taken away is this idea that COVID's been a kick in the pants for the industry as a whole. And it's kind of opened up many eyes in terms of the capability of the 3D platforms and digitization that's out there. And essentially, once we're kind of over this hump, there's no going back. There's going to be pockets of resistance. There's always going to be Luddites, but it's one of those things where once we're past this is not going to stop. It's going to keep on going. So I'm excited.
Maybe I just want to add a small thing here. I think that this discussion about interoperability is made with a bunch of people here, which I respect and I learn a lot from just in this past hour. But I want to say that this is the beginning of what, I want to send a message that everyone that works and develops the next future technologies to have this industry, I'm hoping that they will be as open as we are in this conversation, and will be willing to be connected in an interoperable way with every other technology, because that's the only way that the offering of technology to this industry will evolve in the speedy way that it does right now. I mean, the change that Isaac had put his finger on, the speed, was not there a few years back because everyone worked in silo. But now we see more and more companies, and we can see it by PLM guys and systems opening their doors and connecting to 3D. But I'm saying this is just the beginning. The more technology will come in, the more open there will be, the faster and the more value the clients or the players in the fashion industry will get. So that's a message for me: be open.
Okay, thank you all so much for joining. I'm sorry for those in the audience whose questions we didn't get to next time, but thank you all so much for everything today. I've had a great conversation.